So welcome back. If you're with me for the previous video, you've now installed and set up your own Foglight server. If you haven't, go back and do it. If you still need help, jump onto edocs.quest.com and work on it from there. I would show you the link, but I think you can follow on edocs.quest.com, fair enough. Let's just jump in here and take a quick look around. We can put bookmarks up in the top corner, if we should so desire. There'll be options as we go along to do that. Administration is probably where you're going to start most of your day. For example, under Agents. Let's go ahead and explore this real quick before we start a little conversation about Foglight Architecture. We can see we have a status, a properties, hosts, running agents, support bundles, and adapters. There isn't much to look at just yet. I'm going to give that host running agents, or agents hosts, whatever they call it. You can see the breadcrumb trail up here. They kind of changed the name, kind of an inconsistency there in the UI. These are machines that are currently running something called the Foglight Agent Manager, or FGLAM for short. You're going to see that kind of naming convention just kind of floating around here and there. There it is right there. Of course, Foglight has an agent manager, which is checking into itself. That can be a little complicated, but you could have a blade out there called Apache, or you could have something called Relay, or you could have another one called MySQL, or something else out there with an agent manager installed, which in turn will run agents for you. You may have noticed, though, I don't have an option to create agents or deploy packages, or even upgrade. That's because I don't have anything installed yet. If you were to go under Administration, Inventory, there just isn't much to see. There's a bunch of built-in components. There's no host monitoring agent, SQL monitoring agent. They're just not there yet. We have just a basic infrastructure to make connections. At the end of the day, these, I'm going to take you another way. It's going to be Administration, Agents, Agent Host. That's the preferred way, in my opinion, to get here. At the end of the day, these Foglight Agent Managers connecting in, they're really nothing more than a local Java installation where you can push down Java code, local C binaries, any sort of code you want. You could do Perl, Ruby, doesn't matter, as long as there's an interpreter available for that. That can in turn run that code and return the values back to Foglight, who then puts it into the SQL server for you, or in this case MySQL. Now I'm going to go into the Foglight administration course. I'm just going to fire up this, this Visio right here. Now we're going to talk a little about architecture. I'm going to go over to page 1 here. Now in our situation, we're running a single tier. We have one server which houses both our DB and our front-end server. It also even has a Foglight Agent Manager installed, so it's really doing 3 things for us right now. In the real world, you'd probably have a multi-tier, which means you'd have a front-end and a back-end server. You may even have a large enough enterprise where you have 2 back-end servers, 2 front-end servers, and then 1 aggregator called a federator, one machine that kind of binds these all together. This middle tier design is really nice for when you've kind of exceeded the core capacity of your hardware, so you can scale out horizontally instead of vertically. I'm going to flip over here now, and here's just a kind of environment we're going to slowly build up. As you can see, I have a Foglight server, a server called Apache, a server called Domain Controller, a file server, and a database server. I'm going to need to monitor all these eventually. In order to do so, I might use this thing right here called the Foglight Agent Manager. We briefly talked about that already. This is, again, just a Java executable that we push out either remotely or locally, depending on the nature of the architecture. We'll talk a lot about how that's done. But let's just say, for example, we wanted to monitor the domain controller. We could use the Foglight Agent Manager that's currently already installed on the Foglight server and remotely make our connection into the domain controller. And that would be just fine. There's nothing installed in the domain controller. No reason for us to worry about, is it causing too much CPU usage? Is it causing too much RAM usage? We don't have to worry about that stuff. It's just not an issue for us, because it makes its connection remotely using either WMI or whatever you have me using, SSH or something to that effect. Let me just back up here. I got myself kind of backed in a corner there. There we go. Now the other alternatives that could happen is that we could actually end up using this Foglight Agent Manager locally. For instance, Apache data, there's just ridiculous amounts of log files that need to be parsed through. The idea of pumping those over SSH is definitely possible, but it's not preferred. So we'll leave the Agent Manager installed locally to handle all of its business. Databases, we are very prone to I don't know, I want to say high CPU usage, they don't like outside influence, that's another situation where we might turn around and use the remote monitoring option. In the file server, we might also use the remote monitoring option, and we can intermix these technologies going back to the FMS all we want. As you can see, the architecture can get quite complicated quite quick, depending on what you end up with. In our mere 4 environments, we've come up with 2 different ways of monitoring, but 3 different pathways. We can use Foglight Agent Managers for multiple hosts, or we can use them for one host. It can get pretty complicated pretty quick, especially when we start dealing with multi-tiered design, where maybe we have 500 Foglight Agent Managers connecting here, we have 500 connecting here, maybe 10 running locally and 5 running locally, and then of course we establish cross-monitoring between all the boxes. Don't do things randomly when you place out your Foglight Agent Managers. Think it through. Decide what's monitoring what. You might decide that one Foglight Agent Manager monitors 15 blades in a pool, or you might decide one Agent Manager per host. Both valid options, just kind of know where you're going. Now I'm going to pause here for a couple minutes while I grab my other presentation. Now we're going to do a little tour of Foglight in a few seconds here. Just poke around, see the interfaces, kind of a boring tour, but a high level just to get you used to the interface. A couple gotchas in the UI. Before I get into that though, I wanted to point out this term here. If you've done any monitoring, you've definitely heard the term FCAPS. Fault, Configuration Management, Accounting, Performance, and Security. These are the areas that any monitoring systems are targeting. We might target the user experience for faults and performance, or the user experience for accountability and security. It's a combination of these with the layers of the OSI model that end up with a monitoring solution and cover the amount of area that it will actually cover for you, I should say. Foglight does not do configuration management, does not handle accountability, and does not handle any security. However, it does handle performance and fault. So when we talk about what problems does Foglight solve, we're solving fault and performance problems at the various layers we assign it. Before I move, let's just go ahead and move on from there. So we're back into the user interface of Foglight. Again, I'm connecting over HTTPS, so let's make sure you are too. It's very possible that Foglight might have 8080 open or HTTP open. This is normal, but it's usually used for the hosts which have a secured encrypted connection anyway. So you don't want to be sending your credentials over those. So let's just kind of take a quick poke around again. These sidebars collapse, and I'm going to go ahead and collapse them down. This is probably the thing that annoys people when they first use the product. Where'd my sidebars go? You've got to be able to click right on this little thing. But you go to click and you notice it opened right on its own. I take it off and it goes back away. I highlight over, it comes back. Some people like this, some people don't. I'm going to pause just real quick. Sorry about the delay there. Let's get back to this. It's very common for IT professionals to use vertically scaled monitors opposed to horizontal. So you may find this incredibly frustrating to work with because you'll have zero real estate to actually function in. That said, it's kind of convenient to be able to gain back your real estate as you need it. If this is on an overhead projector or something like that, or a Microsoft Surface table, or I'm sorry, Pixel table, they just renamed it, it can be pretty convenient. You got to click on it to make it stay though. Don't just work, some people get really frustrated because it highlights out, then they move their mouse and it goes back in. Just be aware of that. The administration team, front end for typical administration tasks. You know that's for sure. We're going to go down the agent section in a lot more details later when we start to deploy some agents, but we haven't really got there yet. Support bundles you should be aware of right now, because you may if you're having problems with your installation. And by the way, Quest will support you for up to, I think it's 30 days if you're in a trial period. So if you're having issues, they'll help you out because they want to drive adoption. So you may have to generate a support bundle. It's basically just a zip file, and I can click download right here on any agent manager that's connecting in, and it'll pull down all the diagnostic information. You may have to switch that into a debug mode. We'll talk about that another time. If we want to see what's available for download on the box, we can just click download. As you can see, it's just an option, some tools for sending SNMP traps. Not helpful to us just yet. Out of the box, Foglight's not too helpful. I want to take you up to data management and click in here. This is probably one of the first settings you're going to have to decide what you want to do. Right now my Foglight server is configured for long-term reporting. Stores raw data for 15 minutes, raw data for 15-minute averages. Effectively, as the data gets older, it gets less accurate. but stores it for a very, very long time. Indefinitely. That'll inevitably run your hard drive out of space. Generally, you want to work with Quest Professional Services to make sure this is done right. But for a lab, I'm just going to go ahead and put short term. We don't care about the data in 2 weeks. I'll probably have this VM deleted in 2 weeks. We can sort of go through here and explore and delete data if we need to. As I can drill in, I can see there's actually data for this host. foglightcontoso.com. If I decommissioned a particular Fglam, I could come in here and delete that data. This is especially important when you might have multiple hosts. Say you have a blade that's been re-imaged, checks back in with the same name. Very important that you make sure to come in here and delete that old data. I'll show you some scripted options and solutions to that problem later. Services we'll talk about later. Agent managers you should already be familiar with. We've been talking about them. That's the agent that's checking in, which is on this local server. We're going to go back to the administration section. We're going to poke in here at metrics and see if that loads. We'll give it a few seconds. We're running on some virtual machine hardware here and doing camera recording, so you can imagine some of this stuff's going to take a few seconds to load. Overwhelmingly, you should need to come in here. But it is possible that they will come in here and have you adjust this. That is, Quest will have you come in here and adjust this. These metrics are doing a lot. They're making calculations. For instance, your processes in queue and your CPU utilization is going to help generate your load. These sort of decisions are called derived metrics, and we're going to make lots of those later. We can diagnose them. IntelliProfile is a proprietary sort of trending technology that Quest uses. I have not found it to be very good. Some Quest people swear by it. I guess it's a personal decision. They don't make the logic very public, so when it is errored or doesn't produce what you expect, there's no way to troubleshoot it. So it's better you create your own logic. We can manage thresholds for various alarms that might be in here. We don't have too much yet. You notice there's just not much to speak of. We're going to go down here into rules. These are the actual alarms. Now there's two. I should just go back to that. Administration. Rules management. These are the rules that fire. They scope out, they find all the hosts, and they fire rules. We're going to learn a lot about these as we go on. This interface is slow. It has nothing but complaints. Should be probably removed. It's so bad that Quest even left you the old rules manage button. They only recently did this in newer versions. So they're probably going to revert back. But you see the old rule manager was a little snappier. All the interface is a little clunky, but at least it works. We're going to talk a lot about rules. A whole section dedicated to rules later on. So I'm just going to go back up the breadcrumb trail. Try not to use your back button. Cookies get all weird. You can imagine. Variables. If you have any programming experience, you know what a variable is. Schedule management. We're going to spend a whole section on schedules, but you can actually make alarms that only fire 9 to 5. You can stop machines from checking in from 2 to 3 or something like that. Email configuration. Let's shoot right down here. We're going to talk about blackouts later on, but we might want to configure a mail server, usernames, all that wonderful stuff, and have some defaults things they want you to figure out, like operating system notifications and that sort of things. We'll get back to this another time. We configure email. I actually don't have an email server configured just yet, but we'll get that going. Licenses, of course, we done. Support bundles for the server itself. We can create bundle if we need to. That takes a long time, very CPU intensive. Not going to do it right now. Usually when your system's having trouble anyway, it's a bad idea to run that during production because you're going to have more trouble. We can view the server log from right in here. It's pretty slow. I recommend you use something like Splunk instead of this interface, but it's convenient sometimes. At least you know it's there. Server performance overview. Let's pop in here. We can see the actual performance of the database. We can pop over here, see which we're creating, and just do JVM memory. This is a good one. Free memory. You want to keep that high. JVM memory goes low, lots of bad things happen. I'm going to pop over here if I can find it. There's another one I really think is important. Yeah, here we go. JDBC connections. Right now we have available connections to the database, which is in orange, of 20. Generally that's going to mean you can do about 20 things at once. So if someone's listing 3 different things, 2 different things, you have several different connections for whatever reason. It's what you're going to be able to max out at. It's not a real count. Bottom line, if this number goes low, Foglight times out. Be aware of that. There's all kinds of administrative and basically just great ways of diagnosing the Foglight server. One thing it doesn't have out of the box is a MySQL monitoring cartridge or a JBoss monitoring cartridge. That's something I've been requesting Quest add in since they sell them anyway. I think they'd monitor their own product. A little confused why they don't do that. We're going to go into users and security because right now we're using the Foglight account. That's not a good thing. So we're going to pop in here. We're going to create a new user. We're going to call it It's Just Me. We're going to click Next. And we're going to go ahead and give this person super rights. That way we're just not using the Foglight account. We could have added anybody. Doesn't matter. But it's just a good practice not to do any sort of administrative work with the default administrative account. We're going to go back and then we're going to add this to Active Directory when that time comes. I've already set up a domain controller for us to go ahead and use, but we're just not there yet. So this has really just been a high-level overview, give you a tour, show you what's going on, that kind of thing. Without any cartridges installed, it doesn't do much. But poke around in the interface. Make sure you don't do anything silly. Generate a support bundle. Make sure you know how to do that. Make sure you know how to get data off. Look at the log files. Get used to the way these collapse. Go up and down. Go into the administration. Maybe go into the, the server performance overview. Where'd that go? Poke around in here. Make sure you got a feel for it. Try using these crossbars. I don't know if you can see my mouse very well, but I can drag and zoom into a particular time. Did you catch that? Get used to the interface. I can't tell you how many professionals are using Foglight who just can't quite get it on the crosshairs and get that zoom in. Kind of a little silly when you hit the back button. We can go right there. Just kind of get used to this interface. Oh, one more thing you should get used to. Most charts and graphs have what they call a configurator in this top right corner. Really, it's just a menu button. Find that menu button. Do some exports. Poke around. See what options you have. So let's just make that our exercise list. Let's actually go through. So we're going to call this Foglight Administrative Exercises. Install Foglight Server. 2. Create user account. That's a good one. Number 3, we're going to go ahead and say that's going to be to use configurator and export some charts from the Foglight performance section. So go in there and do those things. Make sure you do them, otherwise you're just gonna get lost when it comes up later. Believe it or not, this is actually quite hard to get this little crosshair and everything working the way you want, and export these things the way you want, and get it to look exactly how you expect. You can see it's real easy to adjust things and mess them up and just not get the way you want. Change the different types of charts. It's very easy to get lost inside here. You can always hit refresh if that happens. Get back to a default view. Come off, back on. Drill back in, and there it is. Sorry, I told you refresh there. It's actually back and forward again. You should rarely need to use your browser buttons. Usually if you're using your browser buttons, you're doing something wrong. There's some report options and time control options up here. I'm not going to waste your time. I think I'm going to cut the video short a little here. We're going to talk about those in context of monitoring hosts. So I'll go ahead and close out right here. Make sure you do those exercises, get comfortable in the interface, and come on back.